There was a time in my life where I feel like religion or belief is not enough. And what I'm talking about here is the kind of like belief or religion that your parents taught you when you're little, or the things that you learn from school or from the community or from the people around you. So a few years ago, I started to question a lot of things, a lot of the stuff that I believed growing up. And I thought to myself, there has to be more than this. So I started to kind of like question things, and that's when things started to crumble. I will go through a lot of the stuff that make me no longer believe in what I believed growing up as a Muslim in a later video. But in this video, I want to show you the things that I found when I started to question things and things started to crumble. And I started to kind of like have a look around. I became agnostic for about 7 years. And from there, I feel like things are just like missing. There's just something that is not quite right. And that's when I started to look at New Age, a little bit of Buddhism. Like I started to kind of like look at different options out there. And nothing really makes sense or clicked to me until somebody in my past asked me to go to the church with him. And when I first got in there, I was like blown, because it's something that's very different to what I experienced growing up. But being critical and being myself at a time, I was still questioning, and I don't really believe in it still. But for some reason, something sparked my interest. So I kind of like studied deeper and deeper and started to question this. If Jesus was real and what he said was true, which means three things. First of all, he actually existed. Second of all, he actually died and crucified. And third of all, he actually resurrected 3 days later, like he said and claimed to be in the Bible. That means all the things that I believe growing up as a Muslim is false, because it's pretty much the opposite of what Quran told us. And honestly, at the time, I didn't really want to believe in anything that for me might be another man-made religion. So I was very skeptical. I was trying to kind of see, is this another one of those, or is this like something actually legit? Does it have meaning and like foundation to it? So I started to follow where the evidence lead me. So the reason why one of the first questions that I asked was Jesus actually even real? Is because if he was not real at all, like if he's just a myth or like a moral teacher that people made up just to kind of like give a good example or any of that, that only means that everything else is not gonna matter. So the thing is this, Jesus of Nazareth is one of the most historically attested figures of the ancient world. And this is not just from Christian sources, but also from non-Christian sources, such as Roman historians, Jewish historians, hostile witnesses, and so much more. So these are the people that have no incentive whatsoever to promote the existence and the evidence that Jesus was not only real, but he was actually died and resurrected. So even skeptical scholars agreed with this. Jesus existed. So my next question became, who was he really? So now that we know Jesus existed, the next question would be, did he actually die in crucifixion? Because if you read Quran, you will see that Quran is blatantly say that Jesus was actually not dying on the cross. Now let's have a look at crucifixion, all right? Crucifixion at a time is Romans' very serious way to execute somebody. And it's something that is final, it's non-symbolic, and it was not accidental. If anything, it was brutal, it was public, and it was irreversible. And an important thing to remember is Roman executioners were professional. So to think that the crucifixion didn't actually go through or didn't actually happen or it wasn't finished just pretty much means that Romans failed. And many independent sources, biblical and non-biblical, pretty much stating the same thing. Jesus was crucified under Pontius Pilate. He suffered and he died. There was no historical argument saying otherwise, that he was just fainted or like he just didn't die in the crucifixion itself. So that theory alone already failed from a medical, historical, and logical sense. So it's now super clear that Jesus actually existed and he actually died in the crucifixion itself. Now the next question is, did he actually resurrected 3 days later just like he claimed in the Bible? If he's not, then the whole Bible is not accurate, because if one thing is collapses, how about the rest? But if Jesus was actually resurrected, then it has a very solid ground that he was actually saying the right thing. He was actually who he said he was all along. So here's evidence number one, the empty tomb. So the question now is this, if he actually died and was buried in the tomb itself, then why 3 days later the tomb was empty? Now, even the opponents of Jesus or the enemies were actually claiming that the disciples stole the body, which essentially confirming that the body was no longer there. But that accusation is actually very interesting, because think about it, the disciples were actually very scared at the time. Imagine your leader were just crucified and put to death in front of everybody, and the most natural thing that you would do is to avoid avoid the same thing to happen to you. So why would they risk stealing Jesus' body out of the tomb that were well guarded? And for what? What will they gain out of it? They're not gonna gain any money, any power, any safety, nothing. If anything, they're risking their lives for it. So from that part alone, it doesn't make any sense that the disciples would do it. Then there's this. The resurrection of Jesus wasn't claimed by one or two people. It was claimed by many in different times and different places at similar times. And guess what? Jesus appeared to be alive to more than 500 people of individuals, groups, skeptics, and even former enemies. So my question is this: if this is all just a big lie, then why would around 500 people that are still alive at a time and was challenged a lot by the testimony that they're saying are happy to lie and risk their lives if this is just for a lie instead of for a real solid truth that they really believe in? Because the reality is this: people may die for something that they believe is to be true, but nobody will be willingly to die for something that they know is a lie. One of the most compelling evidence for me was actually the disciples themselves. Like, before the crucifixion, they actually ran, they hid, they even denied knowing Jesus. But after the resurrection, they're actually being publicly open about believing in Jesus, preaching publicly, enduring pain and death even. Something that changed them from being so scared and hiding and denying to the point that they are so bold putting themselves out there and not even being scared of death. Could it be optimism or hallucination or something? I don't think so, because this is not just one or two people that we're talking about here. And this is a very bold change. Plus, hallucinations doesn't explain empty tomb. They don't explain radical transformation like this. So the simplest and most logical explanation is this: they had actually seen the risen Jesus, because they actually had. So this is when things started to connect with me at a time. Bible was not actually just a single book. It was actually multiple books written by multiple authors in different geographies, in different decades. Yet, for some reason, it's telling one coherent story from the book of Genesis until the book of Revelation. And it's talking about Jesus from the beginning of time until the very end. And the message is pretty much the same and staying consistent. You can barely get a few authors to agree on the exact same thing. But how can you get many of these authors talking about pretty much the same thing over different decades without knowing one another? This is not human made. Plus, now it's very clear. He actually existed. He actually died. And he resurrected 3 days later with a lot of evidence to support that. And that only means that everything that he claims is true, that he is actually a God in a flesh. So knowing all this was not just intellectual shift for me. It was actually existential, because now I know that Jesus was actually real. He was actually God in the flesh. And that only means that God stepped into the history. He stepped into this world to show us the example, to give us the revelations, and to save us from all the sins that we have. So God is no longer distant, and love is no longer conditional. And this changes everything. So I didn't arrive here because I want to. I arrived here because I studied the evidence and it wouldn't let me go. So some of you that's hearing this might feel challenged or feel unsettled at the moment. And that's okay. Because here's the thing. When you question the truth, it will never crumble. It will actually get you closer and makes you feel stronger about it, if anything. So here's my challenge for you. Start questioning. Don't just believe me in this video talking to you about this. Question it for yourself. Study it for yourself and see what comes up for you. So here's the question I want to ask you. If God actually exists and he actually stepped down to earth to show you that he is near, that he is real, and to save you, and he's been there with you all along throughout your life, would you give him a chance to get to know him a little bit better?